If you love good food, but you work all day, take heart. Get a chicken breast and an empty wine bottle and make chicken Kiev. Or sauté of chicken andalouse. These are two fast, fancy recipes for working guys and gals. Today on The French Chef.
The French Chef is made possible by a grant from the Polaroid Corporation.
Welcome to The French Chef. I'm Julia Child. I'm just putting away two beautiful chicken breast dishes because I'm going to show you how to make them. I don't want you to look at them until we get them done. You know, when you want to do fast chicken breast dishes, the thing you want to do is to bone the chicken breast. This breast here will produce these two lovely morsels of meat like that. And two of these make an ample serving for one person. And when you have these two little morsels of meat, you can cook them very fast. If you saute them, they cook in just about 2 or 3 minutes. Or you can braise them in butter with herbs and mushrooms. Or you can bone them and stuff them and serve chicken Kiev. And we're going to do chicken Kiev, and we're also going to do a sauté. But first, I'm going to, in case you're not exactly sure about chicken breasts, here's a whole chicken, and they should come from a fryer because that's a big enough chicken. And the whole front of the chicken is the breast. There's the wishbone end, there's the neck, and it goes all the way down to the tip. And that whole thing is the breast. So there's just there is the breast. And when you buy it, you can buy it in several different ways. Sometimes it has the wing on. Sometimes you buy it, the whole breast that's cut in half like that. And you can sometimes buy it boned. It's almost much more expensive to bone it. So why not bone it yourself and save your money? And the first thing you do to bone a chicken breast is to take a towel and rip off the skin. Just like that. You just peel it right off like a glove. I think it's easier to do it with a towel because sometimes it's a little slippery. And then save all of the bones and the scraps and the skins and put them into a little saucepan, and you can make a delicious stew out of them and a chicken stock. I'm going to brace this up so you can see it a little bit better. Now, here's the center of your breast here, and I'm going to show it to you on a piece of carcass. Now here's the carcass of the breast. That's the neck end. There's the wishbone. And this is the ridge of the breastbone, as you can see. This is a frying chicken. You can tell it's still young because it's cartilage. But what you want to do is to take the pieces of meat off each side. As you can see, that isn't a very complicated bone structure. There's the piece of meat, and there's the other piece of meat on the other side. And see, there you are. There's the ridge of the breastbone. So, we shall start boning. And you want a nice, sharp little knife. And there's your ridge of the breastbone, and you want to cut down one side, right, scraping against the breastbone, and then down to the tip, and then begin scraping down the side of the bone. And then you come up to the wishbone, up at the neck end, right up here, and you can feel it with your fingers. And take your little knife and outline the bone on each side. That's a little bit of fat there. And then outline the other side up to the tip. And you want to get the wishbone off because it interferes with the meat. You'd lose part of the meat off the bone if you didn't get the wishbone off. Now here's the top of the fork here, and there's the two ends down there. And then take your knife and cut down the bottom end. And as you can see, there it is. And then you just cut it off from the front end, and there's your wishbone. And that you also put into your little pot. And then you continue on, scraping down the side of the breast. And always cut against the bone and not against the flesh, and you'll get all the flesh off. Now, as you see here, there's your rib cage there, and it's always attached up here at the end of the wishbone area, like that. And there you remove it, and there you are. That's the underside of it, and there's the top side of it, and that's where it fit on the breast. So you see that I think if you once start boning, you'll find that there isn't anything very difficult about it, particularly about a breast. Now we'll do the other side. You just cut down the ridge of that bone. And if the breast had been in half, I think it's a little more difficult to do because it's a little flimsier. But the idea is exactly the same. Once you get it off this ridge, you just cut right down. It's really just a matter of scraping. So there you are, your carcass. And that's got a lot of nice meat on it, and that goes into your little pot. And now you'll notice on both of these, there's a white tendon on the underside of the meat. Can you see that? And that's a rather tough little piece of stuff which you want to take out. So hold on to it in the end of a towel, because it's slippery, and then take your knife and just scrape underneath. And with a pulling, scraping motion, you pull it all the way out. There you are. Do the same with the other one. But if you don't take the tendon out, you end up with this little tough piece in the chicken, and also it can sometimes make the chicken meat draw up. And you take the tendons, and they go into your little soup pot too. You don't waste anything. That's good French cooking. So now, here they are ready to cook, and I have some more here ready to cook. And the good thing about this also is once you've got the chicken's breasts boned, you can wrap these separately, each one separately in wax paper and then a plastic bag, and freeze them. And they freeze perfectly well for 2 or 3 weeks. And then you're all ready to cook them. And you can cook them in many different ways, and what I'm going to do first is the fastest way is to saute them. And first we're going to saute them in butter, but as always, if you saute something in butter, that means butter and oil. So we have about a teaspoon of oil there, and then about 1½ tablespoons of butter. And the reason you put the oil in is so that the butter won't burn. And the proportions you can't exactly tell, depends on your pan, but you want to film the pan by about 1/8 of an inch. You can always add a little bit more. I think that's a little bit too much. I'm going to take some of it out. So no matter what size of pan you have, you want to film it by 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to put that off to the side so it doesn't get too hot. And then season and flour the chicken breasts. A whole skinless, boneless side of a chicken breast is called a supreme or supreme. That was because in the old days you had to buy a whole chicken if you were going to saute them, and that was very expensive, so it was considered the supreme delicacy that you could possibly have. So if you'll see recipes for une suprême du volaille, or poultry breast. That just means a whole bone chicken breast. And then just before you're going to saute them, they go into flour, called dredging in flour. This gives them a little crust. And then in they go. And you want to be sure that the butter is very hot but not burning. I'm going to put a breast in right away. And we're going to do a sauté andalouse, or Andalusia. It's going to have some cream and some tomatoes in it. And anything that has tomatoes in it is supposed to be Spanish or Portuguese or Niçoise. We're just doing a token. Though we're doing, say, a dinner for 4, I'm just doing a dinner for 2. And these get brown on both sides. And they're really only going to take just a few minutes of sautéing. And just when they have almost become springy to your finger, if you'd like to, you can flame them in cognac, which is always rather fun. Not necessary. It's about 2 or 3 tablespoons of cognac, and then standing well away so you won't burn your hair, light it. Woo! Can you see that flame going up? I think the flaming is mostly that it's a great deal of fun for the cook. And then out they go onto a separate plate, because you want to be very careful not to overcook them. And I'll put a little tiny bit more butter in, and about half a tablespoon of shallots, or finely chopped scallions, and then a 3/4 cup of tomato pulp. Remember, I'm just giving you half proportions here. These are just for 4. If you want to do it for 8, just double, and that's you know, tomato peel, seeded juice, and cut into 1/2-inch pieces. And then we have about 1/4 cup of dry white wine, or of dry white vermouth. And then 1/4 cup of chicken stock, and this would be the chicken stock that would be made from the bones and the scraps. And then about 1/4 cup of cream, and a bit of tarragon if you like. I think tarragon is lovely. About, say, half a teaspoon of tarragon. Fresh tarragon, if you have it, would be lovely. And I'm going to put in about 1/4 cup of this lovely, thick, heavy crème fraîche, or heavy cream, either one. And then you want a bit of salt and pepper. And then you want to boil this down. And this should cook 5 or 6 minutes over very high heat until it is boiled down and is nice and thick. Now here's the difference. See, that is liquid, and this is thickened up, and also the flavor has concentrated. And then in go your chicken breasts, and then this you can do ahead. Baste the chicken breast with the sauce and let them simmer for a moment or 2. And if you want to do them ahead, just let them sit in the sauce and then reheat them just before serving. So that's a lovely little dish, and then you sprinkle them with a bit of parsley. And that's a very fast, nice recipe to do. And that's if you don't have time. And now, if you do have time, you can be more complicated. And that's one reason why it's fun to know how to bone chicken breast, because you can do so many things with it. Now we're going to do stuffed chicken breasts Kiev. And it's going to look like that. That's a breast that has been stuffed with a lovely butter filling, and then crumbed, and then it's going to be deep fat fried in very fresh, fine fat. But before you can stuff it, you have to flatten it out. And I'm going to show you a flattened breast so that you can see the difference. See, here's the ordinary breast here, and here's the breast that's been flattened out, because you have to flatten it enough so that you can stuff it. So we have, here, put it on this so that you can see it a little better. A breast has a little flap when you turn it on the underside. And if you fold it out, this is where you took the tendon out. So turn out the breast like that, and then flatten it. And this is where your wine bottle comes in. You just beat that. You want to flatten it out to about 1/4 of an inch. You could use a rolling pin or anything that you happen to have. And there you are. You see that's nice and flat and ready to be stuffed. And this is what you do for any recipe that called for a stuffed chicken breast. And there are just piles of them, but we're going to do chicken Kiev, which has a butter stuffing, and there it is. And this consists of 6 ounces or 1½ sticks of butter, 2 teaspoons of lemon juice, 2 tablespoons of minced parsley, and 1 tablespoon of very, very finely minced shallots, scallions, or chives, those happen to be scallions, and about ½ teaspoon of dried tarragon or fresh tarragon if you happen to have it. And then salt and pepper to taste. If it's unsalted butter, about a teaspoon of salt, and then a good grinding of pepper, and then stir it all up and take a little taste of it. And if it needs any more salt, pepper, or lemon juice, it's awfully good, even just as it is. You could use it as butter for sandwiches. Then you have to chill it. But first, before you chill it, you wrap it in wax paper. You form it into a cake and wrap it into wax paper. And then you cut it. And you cut it into 8 pieces. This is about 4 inches long and 3 inches wide. There's half, it'll make 4, half of 4, and half of that is 4 little sticks, and then cut all the rest of it into sticks. And keep it on ice or in the refrigerator while you're forming your chicken breasts. And keep it on ice as you work. Now, there's your flattened supreme, and you want to salt and pepper it very lightly. A little tiny bit of salt, a little tiny bit of pepper. You always salt and pepper everything, just a little bit, so that you're always going to get a better flavor. And then as you remember, you have the little flap, which is this side here. If it's come apart, it doesn't make any difference because you can poke it together again. Put this on the large side, which is called the filet. This little side is called the filet mignon. And take the little flap or filet mignon and fold it over, pressing things together. And then fold over one end and another end. And there you are. Very neat. A neat little package. Now I'll do one more. That's not a very big one. If you find that you have some that are not very big, you could use half of another one or something like that to make it a little bit larger, or just use a little bit less stuffing. Now I trust that's the big end. It isn't going to make too much difference. Then fold over one side and the 2 ends. And there you are. And now these have to be crumbed, but before crumbing them, I'm going to put some of these fry some of these, so that they'll be ready and I can take them out and you see how they look. And this is fresh peanut oil. I like peanut oil better than anything. At 375 degrees, and you want to have just enough so that these supremes are covered. And they have to fry for 5 minutes. So set your timer, because you don't want it any more nor any less. And now we're going to crumb the rest of these. Get some of these, move some of these things out of the way. Don't need to bash anything else for a moment. Now a breadcrumb stuffing is, of course, breadcrumbs. I've got about a cup or 2 cups of fairly fresh white breadcrumbs, which I think you can do them in the blender, which is very good. And then 2 eggs, and you have the eggs because they make the crumbs stick. And then salt and pepper again, a little salt, a little pepper, and it's got to have a little bit of liquid and a little bit of oil. There's some, and you can put, as liquid, you could put in water or you could put in a little wine. 2 teaspoons of liquid of some sort and 1 teaspoon of oil. I'm using organic sesame oil. And then beat it up. You beat it up just enough to mix it. And then we have 1 thing of flour. And when you have all of this mixture together, it is called an English coating, or pain à l'anglaise. So we'll start over on this side and end up on the other with a little rack. So you very lightly season your supremes again, very lightly with your salt and pepper. And then 1 at a time, you dip them first into the flour, coat them all over lightly, shake off excess. I find it good to use a fork and spoon so that, because if you do it just with your bare hands, your hands get terribly sticky. And be sure that, press them well together and be sure that you get the egg all over, because the egg acts as the glue that's going to hold your crumbs on. In some instances, if you feel that, say, people, they have something very delicate and bursty that they have to fry, they will go through the crumb business and then give it a second crumbing, dipping it again into eggs, and that's perfectly all right to do. There you are. And then it should sit on a tray, on a little rack, which will allow the air to go around it, and that will dry and harden the crust. And you have to do this coating a good hour before you plan to fry, because you've got to have the crumbs stick on well and which will stick all of the breast together, so that when you're frying them, they're not going to burst. So you be sure that you have all of your crumbs on, their egg on, and then your crumb on, and pat it well in. And then refrigerate those for at least an hour, and then the crumbs will have stuck on. And you can freeze them, but I have found that if you freeze them, and then if you're going to fry them afterwards, that the timing is very difficult. So I suggest that if you freeze them, you let them thaw in the refrigerator, say overnight, or if you're going to cook them at night, let them thaw in the morning. Now here, these now have been in 5 minutes, and I used to think that you could tell when they were done, but I think that you really have to go by timing. It's terrible if they're raw, but it's too bad if they get overcooked. And I think a very good thing to do is to plan to do them a bit ahead, take them out onto paper towels and let them drain, and then put them in a 200-degree oven and let them stay for 10 to 15 minutes or even 30 minutes so that you could have your first course. And then you're sure that they're going to be done, but not overdone, in a 250 oven. And then when you're ready to serve them, have your nice hot platter. And I think a good accompaniment is a good risotto with onions. It's made with wine and chicken stock. We've done that a number of times. And then some kind of a nice green vegetable. I have a puree of green peas with watercress. That's very nicely flavored with plenty of butter and cream and so forth. And then on go. Supposed to have a better thing. Oh, here's, I was looking for my slotted spoon. I might have given you the wrong amount of time on the oven. It's the oven after you've taken the calves out. They go into an oven at 200 degrees, and they can stay for about 30 minutes. But I think you don't want to leave them too long. You don't want to have the oven too hot, because then the butter might leak out, which would be too bad. So we're now ready to serve them. I'll have to go around this way. There, now, and I hope you haven't forgotten our first recipe, which was the chicken sauté andalouse with the tomato and cream sauce. And as a first course for this, if you had time, you could have broiled oysters, or oysters on the half shell, or eggs in aspic, which you could make the day before. Or something very nice is a Caesar salad that has cheese and croutons and olive oil in it. It's delicious. And then as a final course, you can have sherbet, or you could be very French and simply had a lovely selection of cheeses and fresh fruit. So I'm going to now serve a Kiev and cut into it. I'll cut into the biggest and best. And there's your rice and your puree. And now I'm going to cut into it. And we're just going to see what happens. Look, you can see the butter coming right out. It's just absolutely delicious. Can you see? Can you see that lovely buttery sauce? And you don't need any sauce with it, because you have all of this butter, and it makes an absolutely delicious way of doing chicken. And with either of these, you could serve a red Bordeaux wine or a Cabernet Sauvignon, which would be very good if you wanted a domestic wine, a red. Or you could serve a white Burgundy, which would be perfectly good too. So here's a really great illustration that recipes are not as important as know-how is. Because if you know how to bone chicken breasts and 2 or 3 things to do with them, you can always turn out a good meal no matter how late you hit the kitchen. So that's all for today on The French Chef. This is Julia Child. Bon appétit.
The French Chef has been made possible by a grant from the Polaroid Corporation. Julia Child is co-author of Mastering the Art of French Cooking, Volumes 1 and 2.